Hello and welcome to the Greenburgh Student News Network. I'm Blake Feinstein.
I'm Ryan M.
I'm Armita Mojazza.
I'm Lily Boyum. Today we're interviewing Assemblymember AM Paulin, who has represented the 80th District of the New York State Assembly since 2001.
She's one of the most productive lawmakers in New York State, and over 350 of her bills have been signed into law.
Assemblymember Paulin is the chair of the Assembly Committee on Health and serves on the committees on Rules and Education.
Without further ado, please welcome Assemblymember Amy Paulin.
I'm here with Assemblymember Paulin.
Hi.
Hi, how are you? Tell us a bit about yourself.
So I'm an Assembly member. This is my 25th year of doing that job. I'm new to Edgemont, but I'm not new to the Assembly. So I've been representing Edgemont. This is my third year because of redistricting. Every 10 years, the census changes, and so our district moves around. So I've been fortunate to be able to represent this community now.
That's great. Where have you represented previous to Edgemont?
So the rest of my district is relatively the same. I've always had Pelham Manor, Eastchester, Bronxville, Tuckahoe, and Scarsdale, and then different portions of New Rochelle and White Plains, but always New Rochelle and White Plains.
Okay. What inspired you to run for the Assembly?
That's a hard question to answer. I've always been involved, even when I was very young, in government to some degree, or politics.
Right.
Also started when I was about 14, I'm going to say, maybe even younger. And as a volunteer, I grew up in the city, so there's what they call political clubs in the city.
Mm-hmm.
And they're local, and a friend of mine was going to his local Democratic club on a regular basis because his father was involved, and invited me one day.
Oh, that's
and
nice.
I never looked back. So,
That's
so that's part of the reason I was involved as a Democrat pretty young. And then I've always also been civically active and motivated to be in charge, maybe having been the oldest child in a large family, I don't know. So always ran for office in my, even in, 8th grade I ran. I lost, but I never lost an election since. I ran in high school. I was president of the high school. I was on the Senate in college. And when I moved to Westchester, I moved to a town, Scarsdale, that didn't have partisan politics. So my inclination was to get involved in those areas or those groups that did have a role in government. So I joined all of them and was president of the League of Women Voters for a long time ago now, but was president of the League because that was viewed as one of the groups that did a lot of civic activity in Scarsdale, still does. So, and then I was on the village board in Scarsdale for 4 years, and then I ran for this.
Oh, that's great. What could you say has been your proudest accomplishment?
The way I look at the job is it's really in 3 pieces. I mean, that's a little overly simplistic, but it's the community piece, which, I would say this is that, right? Meeting your constituents and being involved in the community.
Right.
There's the, and an extension of that is my staff helps community members when they need an interface with the state and they're frustrated. DMV, everybody thinks it's a problem. Well, so if there's a real problem, they would call our office and we would help them. So there's a community piece. And I'm very proud of how my office helps people.
Yeah.
So that's a big piece. The piece that I do primarily is legislative. That's where I'm very hands-on, and I go to Albany 6 months of the year, essentially, and we work on the budget, and then I work on legislation, which is really what I'm in the midst of right now. And I would say my proudest accomplishments are in that area because it's probably what I do personally, and I feel like I've made great changes in certain aspects of legislation.
Oh, that's great. You've passed over 350 bills of your own. What could you say out of all of those has been the most heartfelt one to you, or the one that has made the most impact?
Well, the most impact on me or the most impact on the world? I don't know.
On you personally.
Okay, so I was sexually assaulted when I was pretty young, and the bill that I'm probably most impacted by and was able to make a change coming out of those very difficult emotions and feelings was to eliminate the statute of limitation on rape. Because when you're sexually assaulted as a young person, you don't have the ability, often, I didn't even tell anyone. So you don't always have an ability to go forward and prosecute and hold your perpetrator, your attacker, accountable. And so in order to give that to other young people, I was able to pass that bill, and I know it's going to have an impact down the road. It's already had an impact, but it's going to have a further impact.
That's amazing. Thank you for sharing that with us. I mean, in this world, in this society, it's so important to take accountability, and I think it's great that you help take part in that. If you could pass one new law tomorrow with no opposition, what would it be?
So I'm in the middle of that. So I passed a bill just a few weeks ago that, again, a big bill, and it's the medical aid to dying bill. It's a bill that would allow someone who is terminally ill within 6 months to be able to get medication, to be able to self-administer that medication when they were near death, so that they are relieved of the pain that they may be suffering. Often cancer cannot be relieved by the morphine that's available. So, and also to allow them to die with their loved ones around them. So that I was able to pass, and now it's before the Senate. And if I had any wish, it would be that the Senate pass it and the governor sign that bill.
Thank you. What do you think are the biggest challenges facing our community at the moment, if there are any?
I think that we're about to be in New York. We're about to face tremendous cuts from the federal government, and the impact of those cuts could have ramifications in our entire healthcare system. So I'm very concerned that is going to be extraordinarily difficult for the community in the next few years. Aside from that, we always, because we're an older community, we have infrastructure issues, from water issues to, with flooding, climate change, to just our bridges are old, our roads are old, and the structural repairs that we have to do are often beyond what our pocketbooks can pay for, right? So I have a lot of, so I think there's a lot of different things, but a lot of it boils down to, right now, if we're hard hit on medical issues and healthcare issues because the feds are going to be making such significant cuts to us, then we won't be able to afford to do so much else that we've been able to enjoy in our communities.
Right. Why do you think that they're going to make these cuts?
Well, the House has already passed a bill that would mean about $13.5 billion to New York State. I'm hoping that the Senate, changes some of that significantly so that it doesn't mean that we're going to see those cuts. But if we do, we have to cut other things because we can't make up those monies.
So as a student, I'm interested in the laws that you passed that affect education. And I know there's recently been a cell phone ban that was passed. So can you tell us a bit about that and why it passed and how it affects students?
Sure. So the cell phone ban was proposed by the governor in her executive budget. So people think, oh, the budget's just made out of a bunch of numbers, but it's really not true. Every allocation represents a policy decision in and of itself. And then there are other policy decisions that the governor always puts forth in her budget. One of them was the proposed cell phone ban. So she proposed a cell phone ban, and then her budget is presented to the community and to the legislature, and then the Senate and the Assembly, meet and decide, what they can go along with on all the issues, right? That's why it was so late this year. There was a lot of stuff to work on. The cell phone ban, though, was one of her, premier policy issues, and it was probably the easiest one for the legislators among those four that she put forward to come to terms with. It was just the way, we did it. She put it forward with no flexibility to the schools at all, and there was a great deal of desire to give some flexibility to the schools. So it's almost a hybrid of what she wanted and what we ultimately agreed to. But I think, I know that Edgemont already has, a bit of a ban, right? You have a ban in classrooms?
Yeah, so in classes, cell phones aren't allowed, but other than that, it's allowed during the day.
Right. So this would only add, it's bell to bell. So it would take the cell phones away during the time that students were in school. So there would be a small change, or maybe a large change for students.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and in terms of that change, I know a lot of students, at least at my school, feel like the ban during classes has been pretty effective. People follow it, and it makes people a lot more focused. So why do you see the need to expand that to like including lunch periods and passing time?
So one of the reasons that the cell phone ban, aside from paying attention in class, is to encourage socialization among peers and to, cell phones are a distraction. I know they're my distraction. They're likely everyone's distraction, right? How many times have you gone, when restaurants are outside, you see two people face to face and they're on their phones, right? So it's to get away from, so school has a lot of opportunities, and there's an opportunity for young people to grow and learn in so many different arenas, not just the classroom. And the feeling that the governor had, that she put forward to the legislature, that we agreed to, was that the opportunity to learn from each other and to socialize is also of great deal of benefit, and that would be encouraged if it was taken away during those other periods. So we'll see.
We'll see.
Other schools that have done it have found that to be true. So, hopefully that's true for everyone.
You did mention flexibility, so briefly,
So the flexibility is if you went out for lunch, you would get your phone back if the school developed a policy that looked like that, or any time during the school day, if there was, leaving the school premises, you would be able to get your phone.
Also, sticking on education, I know there's been talks about Regents exams and how far. What is the general view, and what's your view on ending Regents exams or continuing them?
So, as I said, I have 3 kids. Well, I didn't say that, but I have 3 kids who went through the Scarsdale schools, and during that time, the assessments have been changed, and one of the things that Scarsdale didn't want was the regimented exams like Regents, but they were 8th grade assessments at the time, because they felt that their students were learning more than that, and it took a lot of time for the teachers to grade them and all this stuff, right? So I have been part of a movement in my own hometown with my kids to try to end those standardized tests, that they don't do the real job. So I believe that there should be a lot of flexibility for a school district to be able to assess students individually, almost unlike the cell phone ban, right? Giving more flexibility to the schools. So the Regents are like that in my mind, and I don't know that there's a ban being proposed as much as I think the Regents are trying to give more flexibility to the schools on assessments. And, hopefully it'll work. We've seen in my 25 years in the legislature, I've seen it go back and forth. Regents exams hold children accountable and schools accountable. And then on the other hand, are they really the right assessment? So this is just part of that, and so we've seen the wave go this way. And I'm hoping that, students are better served by this method than the other one. Time will tell.
Since the show is the Greenburgh Student News Network, I thought it'd be interesting to know a bit about, since your district includes Edgemont, which is part of Greenburgh, how do you interact or affect the town of Greenburgh in terms of in the New York State Assembly?
So Greenburgh has a footprint, or Greenburgh has a footprint, but Edgemont has a footprint within Greenburgh. So to the degree that there's any issues, we've had to do bills related to the fire department in Greenville, that serves Edgemont, and personnel there. So there's anything that happens in that footprint, I would be called on and involved with. For example, when I first got Edgemont, was given Edgemont in my district, one of the key things, which is still a key thing, is, whether or not Edgemont will be permitted to be a village. There's a big movement in Edgemont to do that. Not everyone agrees with that. A lot of people do. And I have made a conscious decision that I believe, as League of Women Voters, right? I believe in a vote, so that I would not take a position on whether or not they should be a village. I don't live here, but at the same time, as a representative who believes in voting rights, believes that people are entitled to a vote, and that's the position I've been able to take. It's a little controversial in some ways, and but that's the position I've taken. But I have to interact with the larger town who doesn't always agree with that.
So how often does the legislature meet?
So we start meeting in January. It's by law the first Wednesday after the first Monday in January. So if January starts, January 1st is a Tuesday, it's the I guess the 9th or whatever, the 8th, whatever the next Wednesday is, right? If it starts on a Monday, then it could be the 3rd. So it really varies, but it's the first Wednesday of the first Monday. So we go up, and then we meet until, if things are normal, and I can describe what not normal looks like, but if things are normal, then we finish sometime in June. So this year, for example, because the budget was late, we extended session a little bit, and session will end mid-June. Where maybe last year, I think it was the second week in June, something like that, right? Mm-hmm. So if this could be a not normal year because of the federal cuts that I mentioned earlier, because we may have to go back and deal with cutting a lot of things that we didn't know we needed to do because we were waiting to see what the federal government was going to do. So we've had to go back after 9/11. We went back, for example. We had to go back after Superstorm Sandy for something. So there's always there could be a crisis that happens in New York that would mean that we have to go back to the legislature and have a special session to deal with. So that's, but normally January to June, and then I'm home based. My district office, that's where I would be based out of, and it's local.
So in terms of passing a budget, how do you divide the funds? How does that process go?
So the budget is very much controlled by the governor. The governor puts out a budget. She does that. There's a statutory requirement to put out a budget at a certain date. It's usually around Martin Luther King week. And she puts forward the budget, and then it's off to the races. Both houses, both the Senate and the Assembly, it's really a lot of reaction to her budget. And then we put things in there that we want. We have very little control of changing the money without a three-way negotiation, because there's been court cases that essentially said, we have to abide by what the governor says. I mean, I'm being, again, a little simplistic, but that's essentially what it is. So if the governor decided not to work with us, she can enact her whole budget without us. She just does it through what we call extenders. And that's what Governor Patterson did a number of years ago. We weren't cooperating. He decided he wanted his budget. So every time we extended the time period, because there's a statutory requirement to get it done by April 1st, but we hadn't, often we go beyond that. And then you have to do an extender to be able to meet payroll, to be able to pay some bills that, so usually they're minimal, just pay the bills. But if the governor put forward his policy or his budget in that extender, we either voted up or down. So they have a lot of control. So we always negotiate. And so most of the outcome is a negotiated process.
Awesome. You've done some amazing work. So what advice would you give to someone that is interested in a career in public service or in politics?
So I think you can do public service in a lot of ways. And some of my most rewarding times are before I was elected. They were working in the community because that's a public service too. I think even at your age, you can do public service by being involved in issues in your town, in your village, to do almost anything now. And that's always so rewarding. I don't think that you have to be elected to be important, to be instrumental in making change. You can do it in your work world. I remember one of my first jobs out of graduate school, I was in an agency, and I learned that they were paying men more than women for the same job. So we mobilized and we made a change. And, so to me, that's a public service too. So I don't think that you have to think of your life as limited in that regard or where you can make a difference. You just choose that you're going to make a difference in the environment that you're living in and do it. And for me, it evolved and it morphed into becoming an elected official. And that may happen, but it doesn't have to happen to have an impact on this world and in your life.
You're the chair of the health committee, so what was it like getting this position?
So when you're in the legislature, so much of it is based on seniority for us. Not all, but a lot of it. So when I first became elected, I waited a bit, as everyone has, and I was chair initially of the library committee. Then from there, I think I became chair of the task force on people with disabilities, investigations I did for a little while. Then I jumped to the children on children and families, and then from there, energy, then from there, corporations, and now health. So committees, it's interesting. Committees are, the health committee is very important to New York State. Why? Because more than about 40% of the state budget is health. So I'm very involved in the budget, but also a lot of people try to amend the public health law. So I have a lot of bills in my committee. Each committee is, you could do amazing things in any of them. So in children and families, I was able to work on things related to domestic violence, which I had some background in. At childcare, I had 3 kids, so I had experience in, but it didn't have a lot of bills, and it didn't have as big an impact in the budget. So it wasn't as viewed as a senior committee. So as you become more senior, you get more opportunity. And so I find it really interesting. It's almost taking another course in school. You are privileged to be able to have a whole bunch of people educating you on a topic that is extraordinarily interesting, extraordinarily makes a difference. And I get that opportunity with so many different subject matters. I mean, I see myself staying in health for a while. This is my 3rd year doing it, and it's really complicated. There's initials for everything. And so when I first started, they would say, oh, CDPAP and LIXs and blah, 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 and I had no idea what they were talking about. So I'm first beginning to have a conversation in that same group of initials. And so I want to be able to do more. You know, the next thing I want to work on is maternal mortality and morbidity. You know, I've been interested in that for a long time, so I want to have a big impact on that. So I'm going to stay in this role until I get to have an impact.
Thank you so much for coming. That was amazing.
Yeah, well, thank you for having me and listening, and it's been wonderful to meet you.
Thank you so much to our guest, Assemblymember AM Paulin, for joining us.
And thank you for tuning in to this episode of the Greenburgh Student News Network.